Ladies and gentlemen, we have an extremely distinguished panel, two prime ministers, a foreign minister, and a governor of a very prominent US state. I'm not going to go into great detail on the backgrounds, but Joseph Muscat on my immediate left, Prime Minister of Malta, aged 41, has been in politics all his life, was Education Secretary of the party previously, has had many awards, Outstanding Young Person of the Year, and so on. Next to him, 1 year younger, the Prime Minister of Iceland, so he wins that competition, and is the world's youngest democratically elected head of government. He's the Prime Minister of a country which has had a tough time recovering from the financial crisis. He spent some time as an academic and spent 5 years, I think, in the University of Oxford. Hanna, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration of Ghana, who, for those who were at dinner last night, gave a great speech. She was previously the Minister of Trade and Industry, and before that, involved in business in the Ghana Agro-Food Company, and before that started as a professional lawyer. Great to have you with us. And then we have Jack Markell from the US, who has kind of slipped in as a small state. Very American. Jack, it's great to have you. From what I read of your CV, you've been a lifelong Democrat. You served for 3 terms as the treasurer of Delaware. All of us who are involved in American companies are based in your state, in Delaware. You have what the organizers call liberal corporate laws. What exactly that is short for, I'm not sure. But it's great to have you with us. You have an MBA from the University of Chicago, and you bring a dimension, and it's great to have you in a way from a very large country, but on the other hand, a small state within that country. First of all, the order is, I'm going to ask each member of this panel to speak for 3 minutes. It may be hard to police that, but if people speak too long, I will police it. Each of you speak for 3 minutes, really on how you see what you've heard this morning, the challenge of being a small state, what you see is the opportunity of being a small state. Then maybe we'll have a short discussion among ourselves. And then I'd like to open it up for as long as possible to the audience so that you can come in with questions. So first of all, I'm going to move from, I was going to say I'm going to move from left to left. I'm really moving from right to left. I'm going to ask you, if I may, Joseph, to start.
Well, yes. I think it's pretty hard to follow Professor Frey's act. He's basically asking us to quit our job, which is fine. I think that's a great idea. I think there are more exciting things to do in the world rather than politics. I think that what we're discussing here is pretty relative. I was at a seminar in Scotland a couple of months ago, and this idea about small island states, which could be translated into big ocean countries. Because someone put forward the concept, and it's a fact, that most of the planet is covered by water, by oceans, and most of those oceans are governed jurisdictionally by small islands. And the potential of that ocean is still untapped, and we don't really know what opportunities lie within. So my point is, I like what Professor Frey was saying in that not thinking about the notion of the nation state as it stands today, but really looking at the opportunities. Second and final point, I was a member of the European Parliament, so 3 minutes is a bonus and bonanza for me. So I'll stick to 1.5 or 2 minutes. I think that the greatness or smallness really depends on the ideas and on the neighbors. So we as a nation, as a country, Malta, and I hope next time the professor will mention us as an example, since 2 days ago, the European Commission put out its economic forecast for this year and stated that, surprise, surprise, the country with the highest GDP growth in 2015 will be Malta in the European Union, coupled with Ireland, not the biggest of member states, I must say.
But bigger than Malta.
A little bit more. But what really drives our economy is our neighbors. So we are in a difficult neighborhood. We are in the Mediterranean. So if we look to the north, there is economic turmoil. If we look to the south, there is a humanitarian tragedy taking place. There is war and strife. But when there is trouble, people look for oases. And we are an oasis of hope and really of economic growth and prosperity. And really and truly, our future depends on how we manage our neighbors, how we differentiate ourselves from our neighbors, and how we position ourselves to be an alternative to the neighborhood. So that's my 3 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed. When you mentioned Scotland, talking about small island states, I think you have to beware, speaking from London, of colonization of Iceland, if you're not careful. Mr. Gunnlaugsson.
Thank you, yes. Well, I think there are definite advantages to being a small state. Many of those are shared with small companies, as was mentioned earlier, but other things apply as well. As you mentioned, Iceland went through, well, an enormous economic crisis only a few years ago. The crisis began in late 2008, and it was when the international financial crisis was starting, and Iceland was regarded as a completely bankrupt country. I would argue that all of the things that were instrumental in getting us out of that crisis, and by the way, we are out of the crisis, all of those things had to do with us being a small state. So we were able to adapt quite fast. We were able to move things around, reorganize the way we were doing things, and we were able to make the decisions we needed to make in a relatively short period of time. We had control over our own currency, which was extremely important in increasing exports and getting us back on our feet. We had control over our own legislation, which was essential in sort of ring-fencing the economy. And we had control over our own natural resources. So with this control, and also with the adaptability which comes with being a small nation, the flexibility and maneuverability, we are now in a place, 6 years later, where we can say that we probably have the lowest unemployment in Europe. I think we're under 3% now. You mentioned you will have the highest GDP in the European Union in 2015, but Iceland is not in the European Union, and I think we will. We may just beat Malta when it comes to GDP. And investment is growing. Inflation is down to 0.5. So all the main indicators have developed in such a way in this short period of time that we can safely say we are out of the crisis. Being in control of your own destiny, being maneuverable is extremely important, but small countries need cooperation with other countries. That is certainly a fact. The small countries can have the best of both worlds. They can cooperate with other countries, but do it in such a way that it serves their interests, and in serving their own interests, so hopefully serving the interests of others as well. It is important to always bear in mind that cooperation works both ways. You mentioned the humanitarian crisis in the Mediterranean. We now have a Coast Guard ship somewhere close to Malta helping with that situation. Sure. So a small country always needs to show that it is willing to work with others. And that way it works.
Thank you very much. Hanna.
Thank you very much. From our perspective, and especially when you think of the continent of Africa, and I know a lot of people still think of Africa as a country, not a continent, unfortunately. When you think of all the 54 member states, and you realize that there are just a couple of big ones, Nigeria, South Africa, maybe Kenya, Egypt, and many of us are small ones, you realize that building consensus within that space in order to be able to get things moving is a very, very difficult task. And as a small, medium state, we've gotten to learn over the years that we need to have an open economy. We need to focus on building the quality of our institutions. We need to have a cooperation framework with our neighbors, because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to pull ourselves out of the situation in which we are in and expand and create the kind of country which allows people to achieve their aspirations. When I was listening to the professor and he talked about eliminating the boundaries of nation states and thinking out of that 19th, 18th century concept, well, for a long time, we didn't have nation states. If you look at the straight lines that are most of our boundaries, that alone should tell you that was an artificial construct, because there's no country in the world that would have been able to draw its boundaries with those kind of straight lines if it wasn't by some kind of exercise on a map. But living now within those lines and within those, within the challenges that have come as a result of the different systems that were put in place that to a large extent still also govern how our countries are administered today, creates a situation where you have to work harder in order to be able to achieve the things that a lot of other regions, I think, tend to take for granted. And when I say that, I want to now come down a bit and come within the West Africa region. We are 15 states within ECOWAS, of which 9 are Francophone. You have 4 as Anglophone, and then you also have Lusophone. And within those 15 states, Nigeria, of course, is our big brother, so everybody's intimidated by Big Brother. Yeah. Whereas when a smaller state like Ghana is engaging with its neighbors, we have the benefit of not being intimidating. We have the benefit of being able to speak as equals. We are more trusted, and as a result of which, we are able to push things through that ultimately are for our benefit, but not just for ourselves, but for our region as a whole. I would say that being small, especially in terms of having a small economy, being essentially still mainly a commodity producer, not having as much value addition, having a growing service economy, and at the same time trying to be more integrated in the world, is that you have to play catch up all the time. So you don't have the luxury of being able to sit back and reflect and say, I've arrived. We're nowhere near arriving yet. But maybe, and I picking up from the ideas that I got this morning, if we are able to continue to look beyond the nation state, if we are able to build that space within our own aspirations that we have defined for ourselves within the Economic Community of West African States, within the African Union, to create that platform for growth together, we just might be able to get out of the situation in which we find ourselves. You talked about the tragedy that is to your south. Well, that tragedy is something that affects all of us, because there are a number of people coming from our countries going all the way up to the north, trying to find their way out of Africa through Malta into Europe in the belief that there's a better life. And we need to be able, together, to find a way of overcoming the harsh realities of the poverty and the breakdown of our systems to give those people a lot more hope than they've had before, and ultimately to make our countries work better.
Thank you. Jack.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I think to a large degree, small is a mindset. And that mindset is really built into the DNA in the United States, in the sense that a former justice of the United States Supreme Court, Justice Brandeis, called the states laboratories of democracy. And what that means is states are supposed to pilot new things. They're supposed to experiment and to try new things and to learn from each other. And that's exactly how we approach governance in our state. We think that being small is a huge advantage because it means we are more agile and adaptable, as the Prime Minister of Iceland said. And that agility and that nimbleness is incredibly important when it comes to competition. But this idea of taking advantage of learning opportunities is also very much a part of what we do. It's true within our country, but it's also true globally as well. I was speaking last night to the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore about education, which of course is a hugely important issue in all of our countries. And so we sometimes make the mistake, and I think in the United States very often, of believing that the world revolves around the United States, and it does not. So when we're looking for best practices when it comes to education, we've had people go to Singapore, we've had people study South Africa and Finland. When it comes to vocational training and apprenticeship training, we look right here to Switzerland. In fact, we deployed a team about a year ago to come here to learn what is the state of the art, what is the best practice when it comes to career and technical education and getting students an opportunity to get into the workforce early, because we think that's important to the future of our country. So to us, this idea of small is a part of who we are. We're by geography, we are the second smallest state. By population, we're the fifth or the sixth smallest state. But what it means is that in a very small space, pretty much as small as this platform, we can gather all of the key people when it comes to making a particular decision, and we do that often. And we also listen to our customers. And when I say that being small is really built into our DNA and it's part of how we govern, that always forces us to remember who is most important. And we think of them as our customers. And whether it is the employers who provide job opportunities for our population, we are frequently out listening to what they are telling us and what they need. And we're doing similar things when it comes to the population at large. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas, and I think we have to be, part of being small also means to be humble, because you know that the neighbor, the competitor who's much bigger could try to swallow you and may be successful. So you have to be a bit smarter and you have to be more humble in understanding what you don't know and understanding that we, particularly for states of our size, we need to get better every single day, and our pace of change, the pace of adaptability also must be faster than in perhaps some bigger places as well.
Thank you very much. I don't want us to focus entirely on Professor Frey and so on, but I wonder if I could just ask the views, maybe particularly people from small states, but also, Jack, maybe yourself, on the following observation. I come from a small state, which is Wales. We're part of the United Kingdom and we're part of Great Britain. Until I was 5 years of age, I didn't speak English. I only spoke the Welsh language. We feel as Wales that the English invaded us and closed down our parliament in the 14th century. There's a huge sense of underlying resentment in the United Kingdom, which is why the Scottish Nationalist Party today look as if they do very well, which is why we had independence for Ireland and 30 years of troubles in Northern Ireland. So when you say to me, or when Bruno says, we should be forgetting about boundaries and changing things like that, I have to say, I really had a shock, because I just think every political antennae I have suggests, one, we need cooperation. That's vital between countries, absolutely vital for every one of us. But when we start trying to undo history and culture and tradition and heritage and language, I think we have a problem. And I would say even in the US, if you look at some of the difference between the New England states and the southern states, you really, you know, to start moving boundaries would, I think, create problems. I'd just be very interested in a comment by the panel on a more traditionalist Burkean view of political philosophy than was put forward.
I'll go for it first. I actually think it's an evolutionary process, and that eventually we will arrive where Professor Frey's is saying. I might disagree with some of his assumptions. So the parallel he made with larger companies being more effective, more present, yes, that's true. But really and truly, I stand to be corrected, and it's just a rule of thumb. Most of the innovation in larger companies comes from the acquisition of smaller companies rather than being inbred. But it's the easier way of seeing which new startups are coming up, acquiring them, and getting the innovation from those startups. So I believe that the essential part of being small and being innovative and being agile is still there, and it's much more possible in a smaller dimension than in a larger dimension. I think that the contradiction I saw in the professor's argument is, on one side, arguing for less nation-state and a more Rousseauian, let's put it this way, vision of society, but then criticizing the people in Brussels, in the same way I do, by the way, for coming up with ideas and trying to impose them. I think that the crucial part is that such changes are not imposed, but do evolve. I was intrigued yesterday by what the foreign minister was saying about ECOWAS and the way it is evolving into maybe the simplest but the most effective of actions. The ID card, removing the residence permits in how many countries? 16 countries? 15 countries. So I think that's great for Africa. It is, I think, one of the biggest achievements of Europe so far. My concern with change is that change can never be imposed, but especially with the influx of the nationalist movements. And my final point, I think we should differentiate between nationalism and patriotism.
I agree.
I think they are totally different concepts. I am a patriot, but I don't consider myself a nationalist. And I think that you can be an open, forward-looking, even maybe having a more global approach and being a patriot and not a nationalist.
Sigmundur, Davíð.
I think the nation-state has worked pretty well. It's usually where nations or parts of nations aren't happy with their situation or feel that they don't have the nation-state they should have where problems arise. At least for Iceland, our nation-state has worked to our advantage. The island was settled in the decades after the year 870, thereabouts. And in the year 930, we established a nation-state with our own parliaments. Then at some point in the Middle Ages, we lost our independence, and we were extremely poor. I think you could say that Iceland was, for centuries, probably the poorest country in Europe. But people carried on and started working towards independence because they believed that independence, if they could govern themselves, they could get back to the golden age of prosperity. And finally, in 1918, we again became independent, and it worked. Iceland has since become, as was mentioned here earlier, the second happiest nation in the world, according to some UN categorization, after Switzerland. And it was in large part because even though there aren't a lot of us, I think there were only around 100,000 when we became independent, we were able to make the most of the opportunities we had, use them to our own advantage, make decisions that benefited this group of people, which is Icelanders. So Icelanders want to preserve their national identity, but also the independence, the ability to make our own decisions, because we've seen that it works to our advantage.
Thank you. Hanna.
If you think of having the structures of government to provide a framework for the individual to be able to achieve their aspirations, then I think the way you look at it is what is the best form or structure that allows that to happen. Now, in my reality, in my country, we have over 40 different ethnic groups, 40 different languages, not dialects, languages. If we're going to operate on the basis of what is the smallest unit, there are quite a number of our groups, our settlements, that would simply not be viable and would not have the resources to create the frame within which the individuals who reside within that place would be able to thrive. As a matter of fact, for us, we need to expand the space within which we are able to engage, because that is the basis on which we are able to create the opportunities for the individual to thrive. And so, from where I sit, I don't see that there has to be a conflict between patriotism, between trying to appreciate your culture and your heritage, and at the same time, creating the framework within which your society can be more innovative. People can come up with interesting ideas, concepts, businesses, and be able to grow and thrive. And so if you look at it within that context, then you understand the reason why it is perhaps more interesting to think in a more flexible way about boundaries. And by the way, and another reality that we live with is that the boundaries that were created for us have families divided on other sides of the boundary. Speaking the same language. Sometimes there's no formal border. It's actually just a village and you walk across from one side to the other. In that place, in that space, we don't have the same kind of thinking about nationalism or about putting an emphasis on the nation as above, creating a more effective system.
Can I say I married an English woman, so I feel I've gone across boundaries myself. Jack, is there... Maybe for the US it's slightly different, but...
Sure. Bill Clinton used to say that we're much better off appealing to people's aspirations than their fears. And so it is always troubling in a political context when you see candidates for office appealing in some kind of hyper-nationalist way, whether it be globally or, for that matter, even within the United States, and when you have the movement for Texas to secede, as an example. I mean, I don't think it's going to go anywhere very quickly, and I think in the meantime it's a bit of a distraction. So I think, I'd like to focus on the things that I can actually control, and I think changing the nature of the quote nation state is something that's probably not going to change anytime soon, and I think we're so much better off. And one of the reasons that I was interested in coming to St. Gallen, and that I've been impressed by the students who are here, is whether or not the nature of the nation state changes. The fact is, you're educating here at St. Gallen a group of young people who are truly citizens of the world and who are going to be able to go out and to effectively work, collaborate, and compete no matter where they are. And I think in a world, as I mentioned earlier, where we make the mistake to think that the world revolves around the United States or any other place, one of the things that we have very much tried to focus on is preparing our young people to succeed in a very different world. And I explain all the time, there are 3 billion people in the world looking for jobs, but there are only 1.2 billion jobs available. And so we believed for the longest time that we were entitled to all of these jobs being created in the United States. That's just no longer the case, because employers have choices now all over the world. And so, in our state, one of the things we've very much tried to do is recognizing that we give our young people more opportunities if they can speak a language other than English. We're implementing a pretty aggressive language immersion program. Now, by European standards, that doesn't seem like very much, because every one of these students who picks us up in the car is at least trilingual. But that's just, That's not the nature of of the American way, but I think that is the nature of the economy going forward, and I think it's incumbent upon us to recognize that.
Can I say I like the positive nature of the way everyone has concluded on that subject. I think it's now time to really open it up to yourselves, and I think I can see through the dark. I hate to say it could be a man when it's a woman, but there's a lady there, and he's the man. All right, so we go lady, man. First the lady. Maybe you can give your name, where you're from, and so on, and then if you can ask a question rather than make a lecture.
Okay, yes, thank you. Good morning, my name is Martha. I'm from Scandinavia, so a very happy person.
From where in Scandinavia?
I'm a Swede living in Denmark.
Right.
Same, as we say. So my question is the role of big with regards to, or the role of small with regards to quite big issues of our time. Social inequality was mentioned this morning, and I'm sure environmental degradation will be mentioned as well. Mr. Muscat, you mentioned that you are an oasis of hope. Some would say also maybe a haven of hope, and what role taxation plays with regards to social inequality. And Gunnlaugsson, you mentioned earlier that small states have large jurisdictional power over our oceans, and what role that plays to environmental degradation. So when people say that with size comes responsibility, I would say that maybe you are actually not small, but big. So my question is whether you also assume the responsibility. Thank you.
Sorry, whether you, the last question was?
Whether you also assume the responsibility within these big issues. I'm particularly talking about social inequality and the role.
How do you assume responsibility within the big issues that we've been talking about? Talking about this morning. Hanna, maybe we can start with you.
Well, that's a difficult one. But we have a country which has inequality, but not huge inequalities. And I can only speak from my experience. And what we have tried to do ever since our independence is basically focus on education as a way of promoting social mobility. One of the things we say is that most of us are 3 generations away from the village, from what were predominantly agricultural, agrarian communities, and are now building up our towns and our cities, and also creating the social infrastructure that allows people to have a way out of the conditions in which they were born. And over the years, when I say over the years, since 1957, which is our independence, what that has translated in is a growing middle class. What that has also translated into is the social group that keeps our democracy strong and is making it grow. What that also translates into is a much more demanding electorate that expects their leadership to do things that help to create a more equal and a more just society. I'm not saying that we've achieved it in its entirety, but I'm very confident that the way in which my country is developing, and especially the way in which our middle class, our growing middle class, holds us accountable, which has been created over these last 5 decades of creating that opportunity for people to be able to grow and putting in place the social systems as well as the institutions that will help to ensure that this continues is what is going to help us to deal with that challenge.
Jack, I wonder if I could ask you, inequality is a huge issue in the US, it is in Europe. How do you, as the governor of Delaware, make your contribution to tackling that issue?
Well, the first thing, I think it's a great question, is you have to have a very clear perspective about what has created it in the first place. And this is something that has, frankly, troubled me in what passes for political discourse in my country these days. Because there are some who say that the income inequality exists because, quote, the system is rigged. I don't actually believe that that's why the inequality exists. I believe the inequality exists for 2 main reasons. One, with globalization. The fact is, jobs that 30, 40, 50 years ago that by default would have gone to the United States or Canada or Western Europe, Australia or Japan, the fact is employers now have dozens of countries around the world where they can hire skilled people. So there are a lot more workers who are available. And you combine that with the fact that thanks to technology, and we all carry around these very powerful computers in our pockets, there's a relatively less demand, need for the workers because of the incredible productivity gains we've seen. So if you combine those two factors, it's not really a surprise that there's been a dampening of wages and an exacerbation of income inequality. And so my view is you can only get to the right policy solutions if you have the appropriate framing. We can have a disagreement about what the framing is, but I think so many people jump immediately to the problem without really having a perspective on what caused it in the first place. So in my view, we need to do three things. One, as the foreign minister said, there's no question we need to invest in a skills revolution. There's been no better time to be somebody with the right skills. You can argue there haven't been too many worse times to be somebody without the right skills. So investing in a skills revolution in a real way is critically important. Secondly, we need to engage with the world. There's a big debate going on right now in our country about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and trade. And there are a lot of people who would like to turn the clock back. But the fact is, there will be hundreds of millions of additional consumers around the world who enter the middle class in countries all over the world. And the question is, are we going to be part of that, or are we not going to be part of that? So I think investing and engaging with the world is critically important. And finally, we do have to recognize, there are some who say that the answer to dealing with income inequality is redistribution, and there are others who say it's just about growth, and the fact is it's about both. We need to grow the economy. There's no question about it, and having an average of 1.9% for the last several years is not sufficient. But if it's just about growth, and if the bounty is not more broadly shared, then I think we have a real problem, because we have too many people who are economically insecure, and if you have too many people who are economically insecure, they're not going to take the risk that they need to spend, to invest, and to start their own businesses.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to go to this gentleman, but let's have, I'm going to ask for three questions. Gentleman here, and a lady there. So maybe you can ask your question succinctly, and then we'll get the whole panel to contribute.
Hello, my name is Patrick. Thank you from Germany. Thank you for kicking off this extraordinary conference. So my question is, in the late 1960s, Henry Kissinger penned this essay on the white revolutionary, where he invoked this concept of the red and the white revolutionary. The red revolutionary is who sort of causes change from the outside, and the white revolutionary is who causes change from the inside. And the current world order that we have is sort of based on the Westphalian order. After World War II, we tried to establish a world government, but the UN is not really sort of that incarnation. So I was wondering, as millennials sort of push towards a new way for conflicts to resolve internationally, what do you think are some very practical ways to make that happen, as you are white revolutionaries changing the system from the inside?
Thank you. Gentlemen, if we could have a microphone here.
My name is Manu Chandaria. I come from Kenya. The first, I think that I'd like to understand that is this question about, you raised the history, culture. I think the world has moved from 1900 to 2015 to a lot of different ways. And are we still going to fight around with the histories, the culture, the borders that we've put up? In Kenya, we've got Somalis in Somalia and in Kenya. We've got Ugandans in Kenya and Kenyans in Uganda. We've got Maasais in Tanzania and Tanzanians in Kenya. The question is that, are we going to conceptualize this saying that happiness, when half of the world is unhappy, hardly receives 1 meal a day? Does that mean that the responsibility, can we talk about humanism rather than nationalism, patriotism, happiness, tribalism? Is there a way we can talk about humanism, which is a real necessity today to think about?
Thank you very much. Can I just say, lest I be totally misunderstood, I wasn't saying I'm a nationalist in any way. I wasn't putting the case for nationalism. I was simply saying I've seen debates and votes in the House of Lords for 25 years. You raise issues which I have to tell you touch some very, very sore points with people and with cultures. That's the only point I was trying to make. Nothing more than that. I hope I would be considered as humanistic as anyone else. A lady there.
Hello, my name is Cordelia Chatin. I'm from Luxembourg. There's a question from Mr. Markell. We had Swiss Leaks, we had Lux Leaks. Those came from an international journalism group based in the United States. The business model of Delaware is to host big companies. Do you ever had a Delaware Leaks, or do you fear one? And for the other three, how about the problem of a small country hosting big companies? Is that an issue in your country?
Very good. 3 excellent questions. So I think we're going to go around everyone and maybe start with you, seeing you didn't
Fine.
answer the
So I think that I'll start with the issue of inequality, because I think basically all questions are tied up. I totally agree that to address inequality, there needs to be a prerequisite, and that prerequisite is growth. It's useless to have endless theoretical debates on how to distribute wealth unless you create wealth. So that is, I think, the first prerequisite. Which leads me to the second point, which the lady there was making, and which the professor made. Any national, regional, local, or supranational authority worth its salt needs to be able to raise funds. Unless it has control on its fiscal policy, it's almost useless, I would say. Or it would be reduced to a lobby group or a pressure group. So I believe that fiscal policy is one of the ways in which smaller nation states, smaller entities, can get a competitive edge and can, in a way, recalibrate the lack of economies of scale, the lack of, say, be it natural resources, be it other resources that bigger countries can have and which can prop up the economy. I do believe that there is then the need for that sort of flexibility. What I believe is, regarding the question on big companies in small countries, I think that it is an issue of dependence. What we are wary of is not becoming exceedingly dependent on one company or on one sector. And where I believe that as a country Malta has always succeeded is always trying to be the next thing rather than relying on its laurels. So be it tourism, then manufacturing, then financial services, then digital economy, logistics, life sciences, so on and so forth. On the point of inequality, once again, I think the need for flexibility, say, in fiscal issues, then allow us to make our society less with less inequality. So we are a society that for just 500,000 people, we give free education, we pay, we don't charge tuition fees, but we pay our students a stipend to sustain them. We give free healthcare. We're the first country in the world, I believe, to introduce universal free childcare for working parents. So these are all measures that are aimed at reducing inequality. Final point, or two final points. On the responsibilities, well, we are shouldering quite a lot of responsibility. We are, I believe, the only country in Europe that is devoting 100% of its limited military resources to search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean. Each and every night I get calls from my army officials telling me of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rickety boats crossing the Mediterranean with God knows how many people on them, and together with basically the Italians, and the Prime Minister of Iceland was right. Iceland was basically the only country until a few months ago or a few weeks ago to actually send us some help in this. No big country did that. So it was us, the Italians, and the Icelandic where the Mediterranean is not really their neighborhood, yet they did show a great lot of global responsibility by doing this heroic gesture, I would believe. And so as a small country, we do carry and shoulder our responsibility. Final point, we're talking about the nation state and how it should evolve. I think that our citizens are evolving independently. So yesterday I had a discussion with a group of students on the notion of citizenship. I believe that the notion of citizenship tied to the ideas of the nation state as we had today is quickly eroding. And in our lifetime, we will see a totally new concept of citizenship that will evolve and will come up and will not be essentially tied to where you were born or where you used to live, but a totally different concept. So I think that the individual will, in a way, precede the ideas that we heard this morning.
Thank you. Sigmundur.
First of all, I think it's important that if we want to improve the world, that we start by looking at the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. Because only by realizing how things really are, how they really work, with the advantages and disadvantages of reality, we can improve it. And different forms of government, different states can work with different regions and areas. For Iceland, and I think for Europe, at least since the Second World War, cooperation between independent nation states has yielded huge results, has been very successful. Which brings me back to the question of natural resources and taking care of the environment and resources and equality. Both of these things are easier in many ways for smaller states, for the same reasons, because a smaller group of people feel a shared responsibility, and that responsibility adheres to the environment, but also to your neighbor, because of the closeness. So when it comes to nature, we pretty much feel that all of the country is our back garden, so to speak, and we want to take care of it. Same applies to the oceans around us, where we fought the cod wars with the UK, I should say with the English, a few decades ago, because we wanted to preserve the fish stocks in the waters around Iceland, and have done so successfully ever since. Same applies to equality. When there is so much closeness in society, it is difficult to leave people behind. It's almost impossible to leave people completely behind, although that means that the line just moves. I think now in Iceland we have the biggest or the most wage equality in the world, but that just means that people want even more equality. The line moves because everybody is comparing himself with his neighbors. So being a small, tight-knit group of people helps to take care of the environment, but also helps to take care of each other. Regarding the question on big companies in small states, yes, it can be quite difficult. As we saw in Iceland, we had 3 quite large banks, and they went bankrupt, and it was impossible for the Icelandic government to rescue the banks. But that they're also being small worked to our advantage, I think, because we simply couldn't pump funds into rescuing them, so we just had to let them go bankrupt, let the market work as it should. So if the market works as it should, then bigger companies can certainly work in smaller countries, but smaller countries can never intervene into the market in the same way as big countries can.
Thank you. Hanna.
To answer your question, sir, tribalism, ethnocentrism, they're very much alive, unfortunately. They are the things that we still live with today. But I agree with you that we have to look beyond it, because with the nature of the problems that we are having to solve, if we don't find ways of cooperating to look beyond it, we're not going to find solutions to those problems. And whether it's people who are trying to escape from Libya and from parts of North Africa and coming to Europe for whatever reason and from whatever country they come from, or whether it is the kind of thing that we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment that is creating so much destruction in so many different spaces. It is something that we have to learn to move away from. And I think that smaller groups, smaller states are better placed to have that discussion because they're not so convinced convinced is not the right word. They are not entrenched in their positions in the way, the way of saying it's my way or the highway. They know that they need a collaborative response in order to be able to move forward. Effecting change within is the most difficult thing to do. Because you asked about what happens to white change agents. It's really hard. It's a question of continuously engaging, persuading, and overcoming all of those entrenched perceptions and assumptions about what works and how we have to move forward in order to be able to create a better life for ourselves. But that notwithstanding, and I'm sure it's the same situation everywhere in the world, you keep at it. You keep at it because you believe that is the only way that you can make progress. And when it comes to dealing with big companies in small countries or smaller economies, that's perhaps one of the places where this point of engagement and creating change is the most difficult thing to do. Because like big countries, big companies think that they can write the rules for themselves. And especially when they are come to operate in an economy where they know that they contribute significantly to your GDP in any year, they tend to think that the process of regulating them becomes a conversation between you and them, and is not necessarily a conversation that includes or even takes into consideration other contexts other than their bottom line. So it's a very difficult space to be in, but it is more the reality that we have to deal with today. And by the way, it's a reality that countries like mine even go out to encourage because we want those investments in our country. We want to have those businesses that are going to be able to introduce new ways of working, that are going to create employment, that are going to have the kind of supply chains that will involve more local businesses in their business and then create economic development down the line. Going forward, I think that it's important for us to note that the way in which we conduct our conversation about engaging other countries has to change. Our multilateral organizations, which were supposed to create that world government, are not working the way they ought to. And this year, perhaps, is one of the years where that conversation should be engaged more thoroughly.
Jack, I wonder if you could focus specifically on the question of the lady there in terms of Delaware with your liberal tax regime and so on, and how you see that.
I didn't actually understand the question entirely. So
Can I say that's a great response?
But the truth is, I mean, if that was the question, if it was about a liberal tax regime, it's really, that's a myth. The tax rates are really set at a national level. The reason that companies incorporate in Delaware is really not related to taxes. It's related to the fact that our business law is the best understood and has been for over 100 years. What happened is back when Woodrow Wilson, before he ran for president, he was the governor of New Jersey. And New Jersey actually was the premier corporate law state in the country. But he was planning to run for president, and he pushed through the New Jersey legislature several changes to the corporate law. And the business community was very unhappy with the changes, and they ended up looking for a different home. And this was over 100 years ago. And so Delaware, fortunately, was able to step right in. And so what we have is we have a very well understood corporate law with 100 years of precedent. And we also have the best business court in the country. And so if you're the legal counsel to a Fortune 500 company and you're advising your CEO where to incorporate, by far the lowest risk recommendation is to go to Delaware, because you can be certain that if you have a big piece of litigation, your case will be heard by a judge who last week was not hearing a divorce case and the week before, a marijuana case. All they do are sophisticated business transactions. Yep. And so that is really what's led to Delaware being the home of incorporations. And by the way, we'll take more if you're interested.
That's Adam Smith's principle of the division of labor and specialization. That, I must say, is the neatest argument I've ever heard for Delaware.
It's true.
Can I say, unfortunately, I'd love to ask for more questions, but time is running out. I would like each member of the panel just to make one brief remark, if they want to, on anything they've heard, or indeed anything they want to leave us with, because Jack and yourself, Joseph, have been talking to students and so on. Others have listened to others on the panel. You have a wealth of experience. Is there just one thing you'd like to leave the symposium with? Maybe I could start with Jack.
Well, I would just say, to the students, I congratulate you on putting this event together, and I would just, be willing to take some risks. And those who I've met have all been very impressive. But you've got an unbelievable set of skills that you will be graduating with and leaving this institution with, and I just encourage you to really go for it.
Hanna.
I would thoroughly agree with Jack and add to that that overlapping and complexity are definitely going to be the reality that we'll live with going forward. And so the sooner we all get used to it, especially in our engagements with other parts of the world, and even with ourselves, the better.
I'd just like to underline the importance of two things going together: independence for people and their surroundings, and cooperation between groups of people. That way, people can get the best of both worlds, take care of their immediate environment and their friends and neighbors, but also cooperate with the whole world, for that matter, to everyone's benefit.
I think we're as small as we want to be and as large as we want to be at the end of the day.
So it's a question of mindset.
Exactly.
Can I just say that I think there's been a remarkable degree, actually, of coming together in this panel. And I like the idea that everyone was concerned with aspiration. Hence, education is fundamental. So the University of St. Gallen, the Symposium, is really basic. I think what's happening at present, in certainly the experience I have, is the flexibility, the innovation in education, especially technical education, which is really terrific. I also love the idea that you don't reject patriotism, you don't want to reject history, but on the other hand, you want to be forward-looking. You want to look for aspiration. That came out clearly, I think, from everyone. And the other thing which really hit me, and it takes me back to my 5.5 years in 10 Downing Street, working with Mrs. Thatcher day by day, what you realize is, with the Prime Minister, the buck stops here. It can't go anywhere else. There's nobody else. And when you talked about every night receiving the call from the army, that really takes me back. Or when you talked about the history of the Cod Wars and your responsibilities in the Mediterranean. When you talked about foreign affairs and the need for 54 states there, you have to somehow cooperate. I mean, it's a must. And Jack, as the governor, you have great responsibility as governor. What really came out today, I remember once asking Rupert Murdoch a question about somebody. I said, what's he like? And he said, well, he's clearly a principal, an owner, not an agent. And the 4 panelists today, the one thing that really hits me about you all is the buck stops with you. You take responsibility, and when you answer the questions, you answer them from your own experience. And I think that's terrific. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, as a result of that, we should give them a very big hand.